Also, just note,
How come
if you
I can't hear
please
this?
double check, Julie Sager, we can
Are you
hear
working?
you. You might want to mute yourself. Welcome everybody to the Minnesota SLEDS statewide longitudinal education data system training for adult basic education or for adult education. Some new reports we get to share with you and show you today. We'll start off with introductions. My name is Brad Haskamp. I am the State Adult Education Director at the Minnesota Department of Education. Meredith, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Hi, everybody. I am Meredith Fergus. I'm the Director of Research and SLEDS with the Minnesota Office of Higher Education.
Thanks, Meredith. And Julie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie Dinko, the Transition Specialist at the Department of Education.
Excellent, thank you. And like we said before, Astrid Leiden is our amazing tech host and tech help for today. Please reach out to Astrid Leiden if you have any technical issues. I'm really excited that we have access to these new reports. This will provide some great data for you and your programs to demonstrate the effectiveness of your programs. And to provide an overview, I'm going to turn it over to Meredith now to talk a little bit about SLEDS, what it is and what it can do.
Thanks, Brad. So welcome, everybody. This is exciting. So this report that Brad is going to demo for you was 5 years in the making. So we're super excited to kind of get to it. But just a little bit of background on SLEDS to start. Normally I say, if you could put in the chat whether you've actually heard of SLEDS prior to this training, that would be awesome. We know that a lot of times people don't hear about SLEDS until they start using and seeing the data as it pertains to their programs and their students. So SLEDS is an interagency data sharing system that connects primarily K-12 data with higher education and workforce data. Of course, within that K-12 realm, we do include adult basic education, and actually workforce and higher ed, we have a few other outcomes. We also include data from the Department of Corrections, also from the Minnesota Department of Health on those working in healthcare licensure fields. We also include workforce training programs and include programs from private providers with an expanded set of programs being available next year. And so all of this data comes together so that the state can evaluate programs and pathways for individuals on their way to success. Oh, see, I changed that slide. SLEDS was originally created to assist in identifying the most viable pathways for individuals in achieving successful outcomes in education and work. We don't just want to know about the individuals who go to college, graduate, and earn and get that great job right away. We want to find and learn from the individuals who may struggle along the way, who may take a non-traditional pathway, or who may not necessarily succeed, but have the potential to succeed if we remove barriers in their way. It also helps us to gauge effectiveness of current programs and to guide the development of targeted improvement strategies. A lot of SLEDS data is used for evaluation of programs that the state funds or that the federal government funds. The SLEDS data is available to everyone. What you will see today is actually primarily on the public website, sleds.mn.gov. We also have a partner site called for early childhood called ECLDS, the Early Childhood Longitudinal Data System, which does reporting for individuals from birth to grade 3. In addition, colleges, schools, and ABE sites can actually request access to secure data. And so that's a higher level of access in which you can actually get data on individuals, though they are still de-identified. And finally, we do allow access for researchers, but they have to go through a very specific application process to demonstrate that their research is going to be a value add to the state and to our programs, and that they have the means of securing the data. And this takes about 6 months for them to go through all of those steps. This is what the SLEDS homepage looks like. It's a little blurry, so when Brad brings it up, you'll get to see it live and in person. And so this is the main landing page for SLEDS that we'll start on. The one thing I do want to prompt you to do is that if you, all of you are at a computer, of course, because you're logged onto this training, but if you want to bring up on another screen or another tab, the sleds.mn.gov website, you can actually navigate along with Brad as he walks you through the demo, for most of the demo, the public demo. SLEDS data from the state agencies that collect it is actually uploaded twice a year. So we refresh the data each June and November. So in June, we actually upload the prior year's high school graduates. Adult basic education data gets uploaded, I think twice a year. And then workforce data gets uploaded twice a year, and higher education data gets uploaded twice a year. So there's always new data coming into the system. What this means is all of our public reports automatically refresh and will show you new numbers as soon as we move that data into what we call production, which means all of your data is updated automatically. Where does the data come from? So SLEDS in and of itself has approximately 134 tables of data. And many of the data are pretty well known. It's just you don't always have them called out. So what you see on this tab here, which is on the research tab of the SLEDS website, is we have employment data. So we have what are called quarterly wage records. So employers are required to report to the state data on every worker and what their occupation or what their wages and hours worked are. And it's used to calculate unemployment insurance. But it also provides a great repository for us to track movement across jobs in Minnesota and to evaluate outcomes of our participants. We also have data on businesses, workforce training programs. We have your basic K-12 data like ACT scores, the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments, K-12 enrollment data, schools, the Common Course Catalog. We also have career and technical ed data, GED recipients, adult basic ed, and then higher education data from both the Office of Higher Education for Minnesota-based colleges and providers, and then from the National Student Clearinghouse for national higher colleges and providers. And this is just a short sample of those, and you'll see on the grid what years of data we have available. Pretty much all of our data is available beginning in 2006, with just a few exceptions. SLEDS on the Outreach tab provides you with a series of outreach videos that essentially will be very similar to this training, in which it'll actually walk you along exploring each report and show you the different options you have for pulling the data. In addition, SLEDS, the Office of Higher Education, through state funding, provides a technical assistant network. So what you see on here are what we call the ECLDS plus SLEDS network. These are contracts with local education service cooperatives, and these individuals have been trained in all of the data on SLEDS. So they've been trained on the report that you're seeing today. They've been trained on using early childhood data, workforce data, higher education data, and K-12 data. So if at any time you can't get a hold of Brad or Julie and you need to answer a question, feel free to reach out to your local SLEDS network contact. They can also do on-site presentations or help you pull data out of the system if you need help doing that. That's exactly what they're contracted for. So they're your technical assistance backup. These are some of the activities they do. They do on-site trainings, either local staff as well as regional groups. They can coordinate some data analysis activities if you need a chart created or a table. They can assist with you, help you use data in planning and program evaluation. They help build all of our video tutorials and our reports, and they oversee special studies and respond to questions and requests. These are some of the questions we answer using the K-12 data. And you'll see many of these, you'll see very similar questions in the adult basic education report. So what happens to students after adult basic education? What happened to them before adult basic education? And now I'm going to turn it back over to Brad for his live demo.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Meredith. I really appreciate that overview of SLEDS. And like you said, this has been a project that has been years in the making. So it's really exciting that we are able to unveil this and share and have these reports available for you today. So just maybe we did already share the website for SLEDS, but if you forget that, or if you're not able to remember that website, you can always get to SLEDS via the Minnesota Department of Education website. So if you go to the Minnesota Department of Education website, it looks like this, and you can go to data center. And data center, then you can see the two different SLEDS tabs that right there, fairly easy. The statewide longitudinal data system SLEDS, the first one is for the public reports, and then this bottom one is for the SLEDS secure reports. So to kickstart, I'm going to first show you the public report. So if we click on SLEDS, the public, and this gets us to the public reports. This is what this will look like. When you first get there, I'm going to make the screen bigger so you can see that. You'll want to scroll down on the left-hand side, down to adult education students. And then you can click on education outcomes under adult education students. And when you click there, you just have to go back to the top of the screen. And there you can see, you can get access to those reports. And normally they load. I wonder if the IT team was looking at this. Meredith, this doesn't look right.
It's always a little slow when you have video on, Brad. Sorry.
I see.
It's messing with your mind, of course.
Yeah. Well, no, that's the security report. Okay, so it's just going to take a little bit of time to load up, unfortunately. But what you'll have access to at this point is you'll be able to look at statewide outcomes, as well as some consortium level outcomes for the adult education, for your adult education students. What you'll notice in this original report that is currently posted is that you'll only have 1 year of data available for students. So basically, you'll only be able to look at your 2020 students. We are adding more cohorts of students to this system, but for right now, we only have 1 year of students available as we're trying to pilot this and work out a lot of the bugs. Okay, I did this right before we started the session and it was loading fine. Now, unfortunately, it is not loading. There we go. I just complained about it enough and then it loads. So you can see here that overall statewide, we had 30,000 enrollees during that 2020 year, number of participants. And you'll also see here there are certain bugs within the system. So already this is one of the issues that we're trying to look at. Enrollees, number of enrollees and number of participants should not be equal. So this is just our participant list. So this is one of the things that they are currently trying to work on in this initial pilot. Then if you click on these plus signs, you can actually get more detailed information about our students from the 2020 cohort. You can see before activity prior to ABE entry. You can see demographics of our adult ed students. You can see post adult education activity, long-term outcomes, and more information. So we'll start off with activity prior to ABE entry. If you have any questions about some things here, there are the little I for information buttons that will give you a little bit more information about this tab. And so you can see in terms of activity prior to ABE students, prior to ABE entry, you can see how many of our students or what percentage of our students were high school graduates before coming into our system. And this was compared with high school graduates in our, Meredith, this comes from our K-12 data, correct, in Minnesota?
Correct. So by merging the data, we actually joined persons. So we know, for example, that Adam Smith, who's in ABE, is the same Adam Smith who was in 11th grade 6 years ago. And yep, so we pull off exactly the high school graduate record, what their last known status was in K-12.
Excellent. Thanks, Meredith. And then you can see how much time since their last K-12 participation. And you'll notice that there's a high number of unknowns here. And this would be for individuals that did not attend Minnesota schools. So anyone that attended school in another state or another country is going to show up as unknown here. So that's why these other percentages are much lower. And that's why the unknown percentage is much higher. But then you also below that can see the actual table that has the actual numbers along with the percentages. You can see how many people were employed in Minnesota prior to coming to adult education. And again, this information is from the Department of Employment and Economic Development. So again, this is looking at employment in Minnesota, which is why it's saying employed in Minnesota or unknown.
Just a little note on the employment data, Brad. So we do not collect 100% of employment in Minnesota. So it's only occupations or jobs that are eligible for unemployment insurance benefits. So it would not include self-employed persons. It would not include individuals who may be in the gig economy and only on contract. It wouldn't include federal employees either. But overall, we know we collect about 90 to 95% of all workers in Minnesota.
Excellent. And then, and the other group that would be in this unknown, Meredith, would also be those that we don't have social security numbers for, correct?
No, we actually match to wage data based on name as well as date of birth and social
Okay.
security number. So if they have a full name and date of birth, we can usually find them.
Okay,
Social
so
security
there are
number just makes us a little more sure about the match, but nope, we can still find them. Yeah.
Okay, so for this report, we actually are able to do more things than we were able to do with our federal reporting, which is excellent.
Correct.
Then we can find out what number and percentage of our students were incarcerated prior to coming to adult education. And that is data that's correlated with the Minnesota Department of Corrections data. And we're the first, this is the first report, right, Meredith, that actually uses DOC data.
Correct. You are the first.
Yeah, excellent. You can also see what percentage of our students and number of our students had any post-secondary activity prior to coming to adult education. And this comes from the Office of Higher Education. And then you can see a little bit about those that were in post-secondary. What was the award that they were seeking prior to coming to adult education? So many of those, the majority of those students were working towards an associate's degree. And then there were some other types of degrees that students were participating or attempting before coming to adult education. And
Sorry,
again,
Brad.
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I missed one more thing. Can you scroll back up a little bit to post-secondary?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So as of yesterday, we had no numbers here. So I'm very glad that they actually fixed it. So these numbers, just a little caveat upon these numbers. Generally for adult basic education, we are going to be limited to individuals who are pursuing college. And by college, we mean any sort of post-secondary education and training that is recognized by the U.S. Department of Education or the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. So it would include your cosmetology schools. It used to include a taxidermy school. So it does include some of your smaller trade schools that actually do federal and state financial aid. It would not necessarily include your private training providers or self-study options, such as those you can do through Microsoft. But for the majority of Minnesota, this will pick them up unless they go out of state. So if they're in Moorhead and they go to Fargo. The one thing to keep about it is this number is very small, but we have a very small time period because this is the 2020 year. So really all you're picking up is the first 6 months after that end of the 2020 year. As soon as June rolls around, you'll have a full 12 months and then it'll keep growing. So this number will actually grow over time.
Meredith, there was a question in the chat about the Department of Corrections. And I know we discussed this when we were creating the report. So it does not include county corrections as well. And what was the issue? We were considering it, but what was the, possibly in the future, what was the issue?
Mainly it's a data sharing issue. So adult prisoner information is actually considered public information in Minnesota. And so it's readily available from the Department of Corrections. If they're in a county facility, like a county jail, then they're not picked up. But if the state is contracting space, then they might be picked up. So it's a little more murky, but we don't have data sharing agreements with county or federal facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Then, and then you can see though, finally, those that were employed while participating in adult education. And this is again, if they were employed in Minnesota, so that they would actually show up with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development data, or UI data. So you can see some of that information there. So that is the full tab for this report for activity prior to ABE entry. Then in terms of demographics, you can see a little bit, you can see the data on gender, race, ethnicity, Hispanic, yes or no? Age at program entry, age at entering the adult education program. What was the entering educational functioning level? And you'll notice that this one is separated into ABE levels and ESL levels. So instead of having, it was too much to put 12 levels all at once. So we separated this out by ABE level and then by ESL level. So that is a little bit of the demographics of our adult education students from this cohort. Then you can look at post ABE activities. So here, again, you can see the numbers and percentages of students that were participants that were employed in Minnesota after exiting adult education. And again, please note this is with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. So this is tracked only if the student was employed in Minnesota or reported their income in Minnesota. That's where DEED would actually have that data available.
Correct. And I did want to add here that we are purposely using the word unknown as opposed to unemployed. Simply not having a record in the employment data doesn't mean they're not employed. It just means we can't find them. And so that's why we choose the word unknown. They could be enlisted personnel as well, or student workers who aren't subject to unemployment insurance. So there's a number of ways they can be employed, but still not found in this data.
Excellent. And then you can see post-secondary activity. And this is the one, Meredith, that we saw where there's no one yet currently enrolled in post-secondary. So this fix has not been made and not enrolled. So this one is still not fully accurate, but we have a more accurate version down below. So we'll scroll down. This is something that will get fixed as we get more data in and as we work out some of the bugs in this report. But what we can see, we'll see more information in the long-term outcomes. So I'm going to close this one out and we can check on the long-term outcomes. So with long-term outcomes, you can see these are the highest degree or credential earned by any participant after any time after exiting adult education. And again, so this would be for that cohort that exited in 2020 or that participated in 2020. So you can see that there are some, the majority were certificates below bachelor's, but we have more than a quarter that earned associate's degrees. And then a small number of those that 2% that earned bachelor's degrees, and even 1% that had a graduate certificate. That one individual so far. But again, this data will still be collecting and will evolve over time as we get more data and as more time passes. Then we'll see the percent of high school graduates starting college or persisting college. Again, this number is still at 0, but you'll see that there were 2,169 students that were actually enrolled in year 1. But we don't have further data yet to talk about second, third, or fourth academic year. So that's why that is still at 0. Then you can see for those that were employed, what was the percentage of students that were employed? What was the average length of employment during those 8 quarters? But again, we haven't actually gone through a full 8 quarters since that timeline. So this number will adjust with time. Then you can also find average hourly wage at the first quarter, at the 5th quarter. You'll also be able to see total average total hours worked at the 1st quarter and the 5th quarter. And you'll notice that this 5th quarter is still at 0 for both because we actually don't have data for 5 quarters after the 2020 students yet. But you can still look at 1st quarter and utilize 1st quarter today for right now.
We should note that full time, if you're measuring it as 35 hours or more per week, would be 455 hours per quarter. So that's how it compares to your 318.
Do you mind saying that one more time, Meredith?
Yeah, so full time during a quarter would be 455 hours a week, meaning the individual worked 35 hours or more per week. So 455.
Excellent. So the average hours for our students may not be full time, but majority working at on average about 30 hours a week, perhaps.
Correct. Or you have
Almost.
a split. You have maybe half are working part-time and half are working full-time. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
So
There's a
can you-
question.
Yep, go ahead.
There's a question in the chat about the 2.5 quarters. So each quarter is 3 months. So an individual who's working 2.5 quarters would be is that 7.5 months, which about corresponds to the data that you have in the system. So the point we're measuring from is essentially June 30th, 2020 for this group. So 7.5 quarters would get you through February of 2021. And so I'm betting Deed has loaded through maybe June of 2021, but not much longer. And it always takes a bit of a transition if the individual is not employed at the time of exit. There's always a transition period where they may not be working immediately following exit, but they'll eventually pick up work. So it's never quite equal to the full 8 quarters. I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. Yes. Excellent. Okay. So those are the long-term outcomes. And again, a lot of this will continue to populate and this data will continue to evolve. You're actually seeing kind of the pilot version of this information. And then if you click on for more information, you can actually download the data and or download a the web report data here. So there's opportunities to download that data and to work with that data. Amy is asking, will there be another training opportunity after there's more data in the system? Absolutely. Yep. Well, we would offer this training again in the future. As these reports evolve, as more data comes in, as we get more people that actually need this training again, we would offer this, this training again. We also are working with Meredith to try to develop some tech help documents so that we don't necessarily have to run this session every time that folks want to learn about the system, but there will actually be some technical help documents that you can use and with your staff or with your teams to actually kind of do some training yourself or to remind yourself or have instructions on how to utilize the system.
Yep. There's another question in the chat, Brad, about hours worked. If they include paid time off, they would. Because if the employer is paying for vacation time or sick time, it is included in the total hours worked. Yeah.
Yes.
A couple other features we want to highlight is if you go up to the sidebar where the URL is, anytime you need to send somebody, if you copy that URL, even if you've made a number of filters, which I believe is what Brad's going to show us next, if you email that, they will see exactly what you see. And so if you do any sort of customization, say you add 2 program sites by clicking add another view that you see there on the right, that will come up the same for them. You can also, I believe if you go to the bottom, you'll see the Twitter icon and a couple other icons for you posting directly to those. Oh, where'd our Twitter go? All right, apparently ABE doesn't get a Twitter icon, but we'll talk to IT. Normally you have Twitter icons and Instagram and Facebook. So if you wanted to share those directly with those apps, you could. And then are you going to demo the filters?
I was going to demo the filters next. Yep. So another way that you can look at this, and if you don't want to look at statewide data, you can then start putting in, you'll have filters for program or consortium, program year, but you'll notice we currently only have 2020 available. If you want to look just by functioning level, you'll be able to look by a functioning level. If you want to look by race or ethnicity, if you want to filter by gender, or by some other criteria, is the individual an English language learner or not an English language learner? Is the individual involved in an IET or integrated education and training? There's also the opportunity to look at some of these filter definitions, which brings you to another screen. And then we have a report here of what each of the different filters are and some of this some of this additional information.
I don't think they've added the ABE version yet, Brad.
Oh, okay.
Their document, because that was one of the things we asked them to do last week.
I see.
Yeah.
Then, so let's say we wanted to filter just by program. And Amy Fish, is it okay if I use Detroit Lakes or use the Lakes Area Adult Education Program? Excellent. Thanks, Amy. And Detroit Lakes will still come up as Detroit Lakes Adult Basic Education. This information was added a while ago, so before the consortium name change. So then once we filter that, and let's say we want everything else for all, then we can click done. And now when we look at enrollees, for example, we'll see kind of the statewide and then the Detroit Lakes adult education. In addition, we'll be able to compare percentages. What were high school graduates? Statewide is the blue bar and Detroit Lakes is the green bar. So Detroit Lakes had a higher number of percentage of individuals that were high school graduates before coming to adult education compared to the statewide average. And so you can see a wide variety. Then you can see side-by-side comparisons, both in the charts and in the tables. And so you can compare yourself to the statewide average. Brian, could you tell me what you'd like me to show you one more time? You can feel free to unmute yourself to let me know what you'd like me to show you again.
Maybe it's how to pick a program. Do you want to demo that again?
Yeah.
The other view?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pick another
To
consortium.
pick a program, you go to the magnifying glass icon, and then you in this area that says ABE program or consortium, you can type in the program, and you might have to do a little bit of trying. So like Central Minnesota doesn't come up, but then you probably need, but you can look at Cambridge Asante. You could look at, no, not Freshwater, but you can look at St. Cloud. And as we have this list is still being published. So we don't actually have it published, but it will be available under filter definitions once that is complete or once they have that ready to go. So right now you can look that way, or we could look at North St. Paul, etc. But you type in here, and it will auto-populate based on what responses it has in the, for the ABE program or consortium. And you'll notice in this case, some of these are consortia and some of these are actual providers or sites. And the difference here is how your consortium is using SID. And if a program, the way a program is using SID, if you have a super site in SID, then you will actually get to drill down to more of a program or provider level, whatever you have listed as your sites in SID. If you, so Metro East, Metro or St. Paul, Minneapolis, Central Minnesota ABE, I believe, has this. Many consortia that are doing super sites will be able to filter down to the site level, and in that case, that may be that might be a provider, or still may be a group of providers, depending on how you're using SID. So that is how that is coming in. And Jill, if you are not finding your program in here, that is a good question. I am not sure why Red Wing would not be showing up here.
One of the recommendations that the SLEDS network had for you, Brad, was to add a geography dropdown, so at least you could get to your region of the state and then be able to maybe pick up the program name there. Yeah.
Excellent.
Or have the program names just be the dropdown too.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of fixes for that.
Excellent. So we'll go back to Detroit Lakes. Done.
To answer Shane's question, this is on the public site, so anyone can see these. And so this is the site that anyone from the general public can get to. One thing I do want to point out on the filter, so if you scroll down just a little bit, Detroit Lakes only had 10 students, and you could see from the status that 5 were high school graduates and 5 were not. We are not doing small cell suppression unless you apply a demographic filter. So you will see the small counts here on the main page, but if Brad were to go up and select all students of color, those small counts would disappear. And you would see CTSTR again, cell too small to report. That is the policy across all SLEDS reports, because we feel basic outcomes and activity are not necessarily harmful to a student, but once you start applying demographic filters, then we want to make sure we're protecting students. Yeah.
So here I suggested all students of color and filtered with Detroit Lakes adult basic education. And then you can see that if you get this, you can see that it's constrained according to the SLEDS team policy.
Yep.
In practice.
And that's where you'd want to go to the secure report, because as a program staff person, you have access to it in secure reports to see the full number.
Absolutely. Okay. So you can see again, just if I go to post ABE activity, you can see how many number and percentage that were employed. I went again back Detroit Lakes, using Detroit Lakes, and just left all students, did not put a race filter or ethnicity filter. And so you can see some additional information that way to do some comparisons. Tom, we'll get to, we're still looking at the public report, but we're going to take questions here about the public report, and then I'm going to briefly show you the secure report and talk about how to register for to see who will get access to those secure reports. So yes, we will answer that question when we get to the secure reports. Any additional questions about the public reports? Meredith, is there anything else that we should talk through in this demo with the public reports, I should say?
Just a little minor thing. You can add up to 6 programs. If you click the add another view, it automatically defaults to 4. But if you go up and click that little cog in the upper right corner, Brad, do you see that little cog upper right? Yep, click there. You can change it to 6. You can also turn your health bubbles off and on. If you turn them to on, they'll appear automatically. So it's just a few other customizations you can do. Yep. But the coolest one is the deep linking. So like here, if Brad were to copy that URL and email it out, everyone, you would all see what he sees. Yeah.
So let's say I were to filter and I want to look at St. Cloud data as well as Detroit Lakes data. Then I could do that, then click done. And then we could see both reports side by side. And then I could cut and paste the URL, put that in our chat. And now I put that in the chat, and now you should be able to see this exact same screen, right, Meredith?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Any additional questions about the public reports in SLEDS for adult education? Once we finish with questions on the public report, I'm going to briefly walk into the secure reports.
Just that a few people have mentioned they haven't been able to pull up their consortiums or sites, so we might have to go back and figure out how those were rolled up.
Yeah, that's part of that list that that we're working with Anne and Andy on, Julie. And so once we have that, once we are able to clear that through staging with them, we can have that list published. But right now, they need us to look at something on the staging side before we can publish that report.
So for Jill and for Chelsea, you might have to wait a little bit.
Yep, unfortunately, yes. Yep. And then Ryan, in terms of how this is broken out, that will be included on this list that's yet to be published, this list of definitions that is yet to be published. But that will be answered at that point too. Yeah, like I said, Chelsea, we're kind of showing you something as it's like in very early piloting phases. You're some of the first people to see this, and then your questions, and as you use it, your information will help us improve the system. And as more time goes on, we'll be able to add more data to the system. And as we perfect this, then we can add more cohorts to this data as well. So you're seeing just kind of the very first version of this. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, and for the sake of time, I think I am going to jump into the secure reports. So to get to the secure reports, again, if you're at the Minnesota Department of Education webpage, you would just go under Data Center, and then you see SLEDS Secure Reports at the bottom here. And when you go to that page, you will get, you'll go to this screen, which is very tiny. And then you'll scroll down and you'll see these are the different types of secure reports that are available. And so if we go into adult basic education here, this gets to the question that Marilyn, you were asking before. How do you know if you have access? In order to get access to the secure reports, you will need to have an education identity and access management user account login, or what we call EDIAM login. And so various different public school staff already have this access. Many folks, many programs already have access to this, maybe their consortium manager or someone in their fiscal agent's office. But we're going to be sending out a little bit more information about accessing or getting access to EDIAM, and we will be sending an email next week asking to each consortium manager saying which staff should have access to these secure reports. And yeah, so Marilyn, you do have an EDIAM login, but right now you have not yet been approved for the SLEDS secure reports because I need to grant you access once your consortium manager puts you on a list to say that you should have access. So the consortium managers will be the people that will be able to that will email me to say, these are the people in our consortium and here are their emails. And their EDIAM login, these are the people that should have access to these secure reports. So that is an email that we'll be sending after this training, like I said, next week, to where then that consortium manager can say, here are all the people in our consortium that should have access to our consortium's secure reports. You do not have to contact your district, Iowa. No, you do not. I am the Iowa or the identified official with authority for these SLEDS ABE reports. I am the Iowa in this case. It doesn't go to your district, Iowa. And then Tracy's asking, will the person only have access to the reports or will they have access to everything in SERVS? No, if you're granted access to the adult basic education secure report, you will only have access to the adult basic education secure report. You will not be granted, I cannot grant you access to SERVS or other things. I am only granting access to the adult basic education secure report. And then you'll see what you'll see here is my login. So I can see every consortium and every program that is in this system. So this is the list of data that is currently in the system. And so let's look at Tracy Chase. Is it okay if we look at your data this time? Okay. So if we look at the AEOA data, again, you only have access to 2020 year, and then we'll leave educational functioning level, race, ethnicity, and other criteria as all. But the other criteria are very similar as they are for the public report. The other criteria could be English learner, not English learner, or someone participating in an IET or integrated education and training program. So if we look at the AEOA data in the secure report, will probably take a little bit of time to run. While this is running, a couple other things, you will be able to download this as a PDF report as well. Then once we run the report, then we can see more from the enrollees, and we can see kind of that side-by-side comparison like we saw when we pulled up the Detroit Lakes. You can see the enrollees, activity prior to adult education entry. And you can see there's tables as well as the charts. Then you can see a little bit more about the data about time since K-12 enrollment. And you can kind of compare yourself that you have fewer unknowns in AEOA than our statewide average in terms of amount of time since last K-12 reported participation. Employment numbers are pretty similar. Incarceration is different. This is a little interesting. So with AEOA, you had far more people that were enrolled in post-secondary activity before coming to adult education compared to the statewide average. So you can see some very interesting differences to your program or to your consortium than what you might just see in a statewide report or what you might assume from a statewide report. But all of these report elements are the same as the public report, except your data, and when you have access to the secure report, is not suppressed due to limited numbers, because especially with race and ethnicity, that would make anyone potentially identifiable. So you have the access to the full report through your secure report. One thing you'll see is different. It's this secure report doesn't have like the same modules. Doesn't have the same plus sign, minus sign to kind of manipulate it as much. You just basically scroll through the entire report when you have the access to the secure report. So that is what we see in the secure report. Scroll back up towards the top. What you will also see, and Meredith, you put this in the log in the entry, right? A list of the, what did you put in the chat?
Oh, I put it in the Teams chat, so just for you and Julie.
Oh,
We can put this exact list in the Zoom chat if you'd like me to. Yeah.
So you can see here this is the current list that we have as we're trying to sort through the data of the different programs. So in some cases, it is the consortium like Alexandria, ABE, American Indian OIC, Area Adult Learning Center, AEOA. But in other cases, you'll see that it's actually site level or maybe even provider level data, like Austin Adult Learning is part of the Southeast Consortium. Clues is part of the St. Paul Consortium. Cedar Riverside is part of the Minneapolis Consortium. So you can see that this will differ depending on what you have listed as sites within SID. And this is utilizing data directly from SID. So this is so it's mirroring the data from that database. So whatever your site is listed as in SID, this is how it should appear in this secure report. And I'm trying to figure out why Hiawatha Valley or Red Wing is not in here. That is very weird because that was in here in an earlier iteration. Something we'll have to look into.
I think it's Minnesota River Valley Education District. MRVED, but I'm not sure about Chelsea's.
Yeah, and so to look at what you'd appear as, you might need to look at how your SID, how you're listed in SID, what you identified your site as.
So Brad, we have another question about whether if changes are made to the way the data is organized in SID, how do we change SLEDS?
That's a question that we'll need to, Meredith, do you know an answer to that? Because that will probably be another revision to our system as we go into maybe a phase 2 or phase 3 of these reports.
Can you give me an example of a change in data?
Astrid, are you saying if a site wants to change their name?
I'm assuming that the question is about either a name change in SID or a change in the way that a consortium has decided to organize their data.
Yeah, so that
question
would
came
be
from
an-
Marilyn. Marilyn, you can chime in if I didn't interpret your question correctly.
Brad and Julie have the power to actually tell SLEDS IT staff that they want to make those changes. I don't believe the organization names may be updated annually. Do you know, Brad? Is the organization table updated annually or just the participants? You know?
Well, we just created the initial list. We've made, yeah, I think that's something we haven't yet decided, but I'm assuming that we probably need to revise those once a year, re-examine that list of programs once a year as we upload the data, because we have every now and then consortia that merge or consortia that change membership, and so we need to kind of do dating within that list once a year, most likely.
And are the consortiums also listed in MD.org?
Yes.
No. To a degree, the fiscal agent is, but not the full consortium.
Yeah.
So higher education has this problem too. And generally what happens is we upload once per year a new list of college names and any other data that changed about them. Did they close? Did a new one open, etc. And it overwrites. So generally what you'll see the last name displayed. And so, but the individual student is linked to an organization. So for example, if two consortiums were to merge into a new one, it is possible that that student's record could be linked to the new one so that your reports would reflect accurately, or the decision could be made to leave it at the historical one. Those are kind of the decisions that Brad will kind of lead the discussion on, but there's a number of different options. Generally, SLEDS can adapt to whatever is best for reporting.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the list that we're looking at currently is a list that was when we had old data prior to 2020 and downloaded it or tried to in SLEDS. So yeah, it definitely needs to be updated.
That's not.
But this is the 2020 data according to what was in that data extract for the 2020 year when we uploaded that. So this data is accurate according to what was reported in SID for that 2020 cohort. So
I don't see how that could be, because some of these names haven't been used in like 5-10 years.
But that is how they're set up in SID.
Oh,
and how that data looks like in SID.
Okay.
Yeah, so this could likely be a cleanup issue that you can tackle.
Yep.
Yeah, is formalizing the names and how they're stored. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions for you in the chat, Brad.
Great.
Can you summarize the difference between the public and secure reports? I feel like this
Yes.
is for you.
So the key difference between there are two key differences between the public report and the secure report. The public report will suppress data with race and ethnicity if it gets below a certain number. What is that number, Meredith?
10.
Below 10. And so for a smaller consortium or program, that might mean that their numbers are constrained or suppressed. Now, in the secure report, the numbers are not suppressed. You will be able to see the actual numbers for everything in the report. Another thing that will be different in the secure report is that you will be able to see consortium totals. There will be what you'll see. They're still uploading this version, but there will be, let's say for St. Paul, let's use St. Paul as an example. You will be able to see right now, you can see clues, you see neighborhood house, you see Ronald M. Hub Center. What you will also see as you have access to the secure report is a St. Paul consortium roll-up, which basically totals all of the information or does this report for the consortium level, and then you can break it down to like the Hub Center or to Neighborhood House or to Literacy Minnesota. So you can actually break it down at that point. So that will be one difference or some additional information that you'll have access to in the roll-up or in the secure report that you would not have access to in the public report.
The next question is how will they decide who to give access to as an ABE manager?
Yep, so we will be sending an email next week to consortium managers. And I encourage you to think about who should have access to this data. If I were you, I would try to make sure that this access is shared with at least a couple people in your within your support staff team. Anyone that is doing data analysis for your team or for your consortium should be included. I would also say if you're a consortium like St. Paul or Metro East or Central Minnesota that has many different providers, I would consider having at least maybe one person from each provider, maybe granting them access as well, if they would like to utilize this data. Again, that is just my recommendation. Think about who would actually use this data and for what purpose, and think about it that way. So maybe having at least one person per provider, having those on your support staff team that would be utilizing the data or helping to pull data together, or that might need to pull these reports, as well as the consortium manager. Karen, I hope that answered your question.
I can
Okay,
add to
thanks,
that
Karen.
that under federal law, it's those who need access for their work.
Yes. Then are there any other questions in the chat right now?
Nope, we're caught up. Oh, wait, we just got a new one. How do you clear the filters on the public
You
site?
clear the filter. Okay, to clear the filters on the public site, you would need to kind of X out of everything that you have, and then, nope, that didn't work. How do you clear the filters?
Oh, type statewide.
I have to go back to statewide.
Yeah,
Okay, so if I type
statewide.
statewide,
Yep,
and
and
then
then the
and if I-
buttons, you just check them. Yep, you check them and
and if
uncheck
I,
'em.
yep, so if I had put this, or if I had checked this, then I would click it again. If I had labeled a functioning level, then I would just go back to all, and then you have to click on done when you're done. And now this goes back to from Detroit Lakes to statewide, and then it just takes some time to load.
IT says they're not working on it, Brad. They're not why yours is slow.
Probably just because I'm in a webinar trying to show it. Okay. So that's how you can change that in the public report. The other thing, Meredith, that's different in the public report, in the secure report, is the secure report, you can actually just download a PDF of the entire report, which I don't think you can do that in the public report, correct?
The public report downloads to Excel. So each of the smaller report panes becomes a tab in Excel. So if you want to try
I
it,
see.
click the download web report data, but
Yeah.
it's only going to download the one report you're clicking on. It won't download St. Cloud. So yeah, and then the download all data, it actually gives you all sites and all years available. It won't give you any of the demographic filtering. You have to request those from SLEDS staff, or specifically we can pull those, but it'll give you
Okay.
all sites, all years, if you had more than 1 year.
Okay. Excellent.
You can
Great.
also, on that site, do we still have the little hamburger door, Brad?
On which site?
So go up a little bit, click on activity prior to ABE entry. Click on the next one. So you can click that little hamburger door at the right, and it'll give you a PDF of the chart, or it'll give you a various image file you can then import into reports and things.
Excellent. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. We are at time. I think we can stop the recording.